So today on the bench we have an RCA. This is a Mark 9. Customer sent this in actually with a bunch of other RCA radios. I've also, and I don't know what order the videos will get put up in, but I've got Mark 9s, Mark 8s, Mark 7s. I think that's it. I think that's all the different series, but there's multiples of some. So anyhow, this one's in really nice condition. You can see the faceplate's about as mint as it gets. The the cabinet as well is in really nice condition. Just doesn't get much nicer. Now these do have little sliding doors. That's how you would actually access your crystals without having to remove this cabinet, because it can be kind of tricky. Actually, these are a tight squeeze in these cabinets. They push out the back because there's a little lip here. But yeah, it can be a little challenging trying to get these things out. I mean, they're really tight. You push, kind of jiggle back and forth. But in any case, this one, pretty much all these radios want them fixed up. So electrolytic capacitors replaced and anything else they might need. Now, like I say, this one's in really nice shape. So it had the electrolytic caps changed, and some of the resistors have been replaced because they're old carbon composition resistors. So any resistors that were out of tolerance were replaced. These are a fairly basic radio. They're not powerhouses. And I guess that's actually a good place to start with these. They're not powerhouses for a reason. It's a one-tube wonder when it comes to the transmit circuit. Now, for those of you not familiar, it's a crystal synthesized radio. This is back in the early days, so it's not like modern, well, not even modern times, we use PLLs, but previously to PLLs, or phase-locked loop circuits, we had crystal mixing. So with just a handful of crystals, you could come up with all 23 or even 40 channels of the CB band. In the early days, however, you had 2 crystals for every single channel. So if you wanted to talk on channel 11, you needed a channel 11 transmit and a channel 11 receive crystal. Now with this radio, honestly, you really didn't have to have any receive crystals because this also has a VFO. So this little thumb wheel here. And you may notice the board flexes a little bit when I do that. There's actually a bracket on the bottom side that drops down, goes back. When the cabinet's installed, there's actually a screw that goes into that little bracket that's kind of at an angle. It runs between the bottom of this trimmer capacitor here and back over to here. And then that attaches it to the cabinet to kind of stiffen the board up a little bit. But, yeah, so as you can see in here, this one has, actually let me turn it off, get rid of that blindingly bright light bulb. There. Now this one is this is a full, decked out radio. It has a full crystal complement. No empty hole. Well, there's one empty hole, but that one's not used in these radios. So this one will do 9 channels. What is it? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, 9. 9 channels. But like I say, not powerhouses on transmit, and that's because this tube does it all. There is no individual oscillator tube. It doesn't have a separate driver and a final tube. That's it. Crystal gets there's a transformer here, couples it. This is a dual section tube, so one section is the oscillator, the other side or the other half of that tube is the transmit RF amp. That's it. So the tube oscillates the crystal. That in one half of the tube, it's sent over to the RF amplifier section. This is your audio tube, so this is your modulator tube. This modulates it, your carrier, and then out the antenna jack. So as far as RF energy goes, absolutely everything is done in this one single tube for transmit power. And then modulation is done also, for your speaker. This is your audio tube. So pretty much a lot of the rest of the radios, it's all receive. But like I say, being a single actually not just a single tube, just a half a section of one tube for RF output. Like I say, they're not powerhouses. You're not going to be blowing people's doors down with one of these. But they're nice radios. Now you can see it is a circuit boarded radio. It's a pink circuit board. Kind of an odd color. Now the Mark 8s had a dark brown type board. These had the pink board. It is fiberglass, because you can actually even see the fiberglass strands in it when you look really close. But I'm not sure what the composition of like the epoxy was used, because it smells really weird. And I will warn you, if you work on one of these, be very careful when you're soldering on these. This circuit board is very easy to damage with a soldering iron. So for starters, don't use lead-free solder. You want to use like lead tin composition or eutectic solder, something that has a lower melting point, so you're not nuking this circuit board with a soldering iron. So like I say, now there are some solid-state components in here. It does have a few diodes. You can see, and these are the old school diodes here. There's one here, there's one here. Actually, there's a small germanium on the bottom of the board. Or is that, no, I think that's actually a selenium on the bottom of the board. But yeah, you've got two here. These are your rectifier diodes, and then it has another one. I don't even know if, a little bit of light here. If you can just see it hiding down here, there's a selenium rectifier right here. And that's used for your the negative bias. That's part of the negative bias power supply circuit down there. So it does have a little bit of solid state in it. Of course, diodes were really expensive back then. Compared to nowadays, but they were still cheaper than using a tube as a rectifier. So that's why even in tube radios you'd see diodes. Yeah, they were a little bit more, vastly more expensive than they are nowadays, but compared to the price of a vacuum tube, they were cheaper. And honestly, they last longer. So, like I say, just a quick overview of the radio. As far as features go, doesn't really have a lot. Transmit and receive selectors. On-off volume control. Squelch is the rear half of this. Now, the squelch on these operates backwards. So most people are familiar with turning their squelch control up to turn the squelch on. These are the exact opposite of that. You turn them to the left to turn the squelch up. So that is squelch off. And then to enable the squelch, you turn it the opposite direction of what you would a normal radio. Dual function meter, signal, and transmit. The transmit's kind of, I don't even know how to put this. Well, actually, let me just turn the radio on. Flip to dummy load. This switch really isn't needed, in my opinion. You just leave it in the signal, because right in this position, you'll get your received signal strength will show in this meter. In this position, it won't. Now in transmit, let's see. Yeah, I had it on there just a little bit ago, so it shouldn't take too long to warm up. Okay, so there's our transmit in the transmit position. But when I talk into the microphone, you can see the needle really doesn't do much. Now, if you switch to signal, okay, that would show your incoming signal, but you can see the needle goes up rather far because it's actually the receiver circuit's kind of also picking up the transmitted signal through this part of the meter. So most people just leave it in the S position. There's also a switch here, off spot switch. So if you're using the VFO, and actually this VFO, if you notice, it's got some weird numbers on this portion of the wheel, and then you keep spinning, it gets to CB channels. That's because it's an air variable capacitor, so it actually does, it's only a half rotation gets you full channel coverage, and then you're just repeating. So what they did was they put the channel numbers on one half of the dial, and the channel frequencies on the other half. So, that is, exactly opposite of 26965 channel 1, because you're right there, you're rocking where you're right at the end of it, and then it's, as you rotate it, it starts back up again. So yeah, that was kind of novel. Instead of just making it stop, they made it, where it's continuously tunable. It just goes from channel numbers to frequencies. So to use the VFO, you put it in this first position where someone looks like a T sticker, I guess. Now, back in the days when you bought these, they'd come with a little pack of stickers. And so whatever crystals you'd have put in the radio, you'd have filled in these little blanks here. You'd have put your little channel digits or numbers in there. But to use the VFO, you put it in this position. Now, if you want to calibrate this dial to the transmit channel that you're on, so you pick a frequency, whatever channel it is, put it on spot, and then rotate this dial. Now, if you watch this meter right here, now notice I'm not keying the microphone. Okay, so you just, put it on whatever channel you'd want to transmit on, put it on spot, and then you tune this for maximum meter deflection. Okay? And now the receiver, this dial is now perfectly calibrated to the transmit frequency. So it's just using the transmit oscillator tube back here, sending it over to the receiver, and then you're tuning it for maximum deflection. So if your crystal, now the downfall of that is, and you got to remember these are crystals, they're old. If your transmit crystals are not perfectly centered on channel, you just tuned your receiver perfectly not on channel. It's going to be off exactly as much as this is. That's the downfall of crystals. As they get old, they change frequency. Now these crystals, actually this radio only had one set of crystals in it. So what I did was he had, like I said, this customer said a bunch of RCA radios. So one of them, the Mark, I think has an 8 they came out of. It's in pretty horrible condition, or a lot worse condition. But it had a full crystal complement. So I actually just extracted all of the crystals out of that radio and put them into this radio. And the crystals, they're all off. You're going to run into that. You can order brand spanking new crystals. You know, you pick up the phone, say I need some custom cut crystals for this. ICM will cut them for you. They show up, you'll stick them in this radio, and odds are it's going to be off frequency. Now, it's going to be very, very close to being perfect. Actually, it will be within spec as far as the radio, specs go, but it is going to be off a little bit, and that's because there's no trimmer capacitor for each of these crystals. So whatever it oscillates at, that's what it is. There's no adjustment to tune the frequency for each of these crystals. It's an AM radio. You really don't notice being off frequency unless you're drastically off. But these are off. Some of these are actually getting, I think actually it was just one crystal was off to the point where, it's getting pretty bad. A receiving station would probably start to have a hard time. I think that was the 23 crystal that's in this radio. But, it's up to the customer if he wants to get some new ones cut. Because the problem is, even if you buy new old stock crystals, odds are they're going to be just as bad as what's in your radio already. Honestly, the only way to guarantee you're going to have crystals that are on frequency is to get new ones cut, new made crystals. And that gets really expensive because 9 channels, total 18. Yeah, 18 times, whatever you get charged for those crystals, you can quickly get to the point where you need to take out a second mortgage on your house just to recrystal your radio. But so that's why, again, same as back in the old days, if you got 1 channel or 2 channels you talk on, you get a set of crystals for those, you're good to go. And in this case, you get 2 crystals. Like if you talked on, you had 1 or 2 home channels that you talk on, you get 2 crystals cut, stick them in the transmit slot, and then just use the VFO. So now you only have to buy 2 crystals, 2 transmit crystals. You never even have to turn the receive dial here. Just leave it in this position and use the VFO, and just tune the VFO knob, for your receiver. So nice little radios. Now there's one downfall of these things. That would be the microphone. Well, not so much the microphone, but the microphone plug. So for starters, if you're going to work on one of these, and you need a microphone plugged in when you're testing it, for transmit, don't just plug this cord in with the cabinet off. There is, actually pulled out another RCA mic to show you. Okay, it has this little metal clip that actually goes up underneath and latches in to the bottom, to the cover, when the cover's on this radio, to prevent you from being able to pull this out. And what you have to do is reach in there with your fingernail, kind of flex this thing back to unplug it. So this is the downfall of the radio. If you get this radio without a microphone, it's this flat connector here. So it's not like it's got maybe an oddball 3-pin or a 2-pin round plug. You could just take that out and stick in a modern 4-pin. Yeah, it's flat and it's molded into this plastic front. So you're kind of screwed. But be careful if you power this radio up with the cabinet off. When you plug in the microphone, be damn sure you put a piece of heat shrink tubing or something over top of this. Because if you plug this in, like it is right now, like this one is right now, without something over top of this, you're going to short out these 2 pins right here. because the pins stick out to about here, and the sockets in the radio, the back of the pins is way back here, and that's all exposed metal. So if you just slightly touch this thing, you're going to short out the pins on the microphone. So just make sure when you're servicing one of these, slide some heat shrink tubing or a couple wraps of tape around that before you plug it in. Just word to the wise. One other nice thing, now this one and another, I think the other one's a Mark 8 that's still in the original box. Kind of nice, something you don't see very often, but since it was in the original box, came with the original manual. And back in the day, manuals were real manuals. It's not like this crap they send you nowadays where it's a couple pages of, yeah, turn the radio on, change channels here, end of story. If you need to work on it, you got to go, well, manufacturers just don't give you service manuals anymore. This is back in the day when you repaired something when it broke. And when you bought a radio or something, it came with the service manual. So they call this an instruction manual, but actually it's the instruction manual and the service manual. So the first couple pages, well, first page, your specs, a little bit about operation, coax cables and antennas, and then you get right into the meat of it. So, you know, your crystals, your crystal mixing. So your transmit crystals in this are direct. So if you're transmitting on channel 1, the crystal is 26.965. Gets the oscillator, half of this tube, one half of it oscillates at 26.965, and then it just gets amplified. There's no tripling, no doubling, no mixing, no nothing. It's direct, it's oscillated and amplified. So you can see that right here on the crystal selection chart. So here's your channel frequencies. So like channel 1, you can see 26965. The transmit crystal is also 26.965. Now your receive crystals, because I know somebody's going to ask, can I unlock the VFO on this so I don't need transmit crystals? No, you can't. And that's because there's an offset for receive. So you can see the receive, you know, for channel 1, transmits 26965. The receive crystal for channel 1 is 28.615. It's like 1.6 something megahertz difference, IF there. So yeah, you cannot unlock this to work like you can on some radios. You cannot unlock this to work on transmit as well. But you know, you continue on through circuit descriptions, maintenance, alignment procedure, voltage chart, parts list, parts diagram, and even the schematic. So, you know, I wish they'd still do this today, because that really pisses me off. These manufacturers make radios and it's some national secret that the planet's going to come to an end if the schematic for their radio accidentally gets out. And I tell people nowadays, when you go to buy a new radio, contact your seller or the manufacturer. If they won't give you a service manual and schematic for it, or at least make it available to you, don't buy their radio, because that's a bunch of horse shit. Pardon my French, but it really pisses me off that these manufacturers, you know, back in the day when you got an owner's manual, you didn't even have to ask for the service manual. It came in the box with the radio. So there's my little vent on modern radios. But there you go. So there's an RCA Mark 9 in really nice shape. Like I say, it's been recapped. Now this can here has actually been completely restuffed. So there's a new dual element can cap in here. And then there was another one kind of similar looking to this with the cardboard cover on it, but it was shorter. It was right here. That was actually a single section. So this originally had 3 sections. This one is now 2 sections. It had a 50, a 50, and a 100 microfarad. And then there was a single 100 microfarad section over here. This one was just replaced with a modern dual section 50 microfarad, and then 200 microfarad. There's enough room here, and actually the holes, it just works out where a lot of the mounting holes for the tabs, and that's another thing, these are can caps, but instead of having the twist like you have with a steel chassis, these actually have pins stick out of the bottom for mounting. So a lot of those just weren't used. So these 2 can caps was able to get those lined up with some holes. These are, you know, modern, just radial single section capacitors, but they lined up perfectly. Was able to just set them down in those 2 holes, get the positive and negatives, because actually these 2 the negative is actually the high side on one of this, because it's the way the power supply works on this. So the negative here actually has, this negative here actually has voltage on it. And actually we can see that. Get the schematic back out here. So you can actually see that's right there. So these two little diodes here, that was the two little guys back over here. And then camera comes into focus. There you go. You can see there's a 50 and a 50 and a 100 and a 100. So that was the two 50s and a 100, and then there was another one over here that was a single 100. So, but you can see, back into focus. Okay, so you can see the negative here is high here. Okay, the way they're tied in. One end does go to ground on the one capacitor, but the other one actually ties directly to the positive. Okay, but yeah, like I say, so just watch that when you're doing stuff like this. You know, when you have to use modern caps to you know, redo stuff. But like I said, it's just really convenient how easily two modern caps are, just to you know, basically pull out the old can cap, and the holes there are perfectly for lining up and installing a pair of modern style caps. But and don't worry about it, this cap being kind of close to this tube, because this tube, yeah, it doesn't get. You could, after this radio being on for 12 hours, you could pull this thing out and hell, stick it in your mouth. It'll be barely lukewarm. This one runs really, really cool. Actually, a lot of these tubes, you know, this will run hot like a normal tube. This one actually doesn't run too hot, and these will run a little warm. But this one is not bad, and this one's really low temperature. So there you go. There's a RCA Mark 9 ready to be put back into use.